Communicative language teaching is an approach. It's not a specific method, but the focus is on developing students who are able to communicate actively using the language in real situations for real purposes. Communicative language teaching dates to the late 1960s in Great Britain. A lot of British linguists contributed to the formation of this approach, and the goal is to make communicative competence the purpose of language teaching. Communicative competence is what a speaker needs to know in order to be communicatively competent in a speech community. In other words, to be able to respond, to interact, to initiate, to adjust competently to communication with other speakers. So again, it represents a philosophy of teaching based on communicative language use. Communicative language teaching emphasizes the function of language over the grammatical structures. So while grammar is still important, actually communicating is more important than knowing the rules of grammar. So meaning is primary. When a student speaks, can you understand what they're trying to say? You want students to try to use the target language as much as possible from the very beginning of learning or acquiring the second language. The scope and sequence of learning language is determined by perhaps the classes students are experiencing, the meanings that they need to communicate to function, and specific functions like, for example, making requests or apologizing or breaking down narrative text or recipes or science observations or whatever students need. Students can use their L1 to an extent as they are approaching developing the target language. Activities and strategies for learning are varied. And again, the goal is that students can communicate. Different researchers came up with different ideas for what communicative competence looked like. Delheim said that someone who acquires communicative competence acquires both knowledge and ability for language use. The person understands whether a language action is formally possible, whether it's feasible, whether you can actually do it, whether something is appropriate in the context, and whether something is actually done. Canal and Swain identify 4 dimensions of communicative competence. There's grammatical competence, sociolinguistic competence. Grammatical competence looks at can the pieces of language come together based on the grammar of a language. Sociolinguistic competence looks at within the social interactions between the people who are talking together, what kinds of language are appropriate. Discourse competence looks at when you're in a specific setting, what kinds of language make up an interaction in that setting. So if I'm in a science class, what kinds of language make up doing a science experiment? If I'm in a math class, what kinds of language make up analyzing a word problem? And then strategic competence is the coping strategies that we use to initiate communication, to end it, to keep it going, to fix it when there's a mistake or an error, and to redirect it when it's going a direction and we don't necessarily want it to go. So in the classroom, we want tasks that promote communication, so that actually involves language learning. We want tasks that are real world and that are meaningful and authentic for our students. So from the communicative language perspective, the primary function of language is for interaction and communication. And language is a system for the expression of meaning. So activities that we use might be information gaps, where student A has some information and student B has other information, and they have to work together to fill in the gaps that each other has. There's choice, and there is feedback. The goal is for teachers to guide students to use language in unrehearsed situations. So this is not memorized language like from the audiolingual method. This is being able to respond appropriately in the moment to situations. Authentic material should be used. True communication is purposeful. And activities are better carried out in small groups where students have more opportunities to communicate. In a whole group setting where the teacher dominates and maybe one student at a time gets to respond, there are a lot of students who are not communicating. Some of the critiques of the method is that you need native speakers to be teachers because the teacher has to respond to any and every language problem that may come up. For English teaching purposes, this isn't as big of a concern as it would be for foreign language teaching purposes. Another critique is that it is student-centered, so teachers can't intervene when there are errors. But that's kind of the purpose behind communicative competence and communicative language teaching, is that not every error is corrected. One larger critique is that explicit grammar teaching is not a focus. So students may not be as accurate. But there is an emphasis on fluency and getting language produced, even if it's not always perfectly accurate. Communicative language teaching approach believes that accuracy will develop with time. So in the classroom, grammatical structures must serve a purpose for language functions. Again, authentic materials are preferred. Again, less attention to grammar and more to fluency. But always we want clear, unambiguous, direct communication from our students. Technology and increased teachers' language proficiency now make communicative language teaching, CLT, more possible. And here are some comparisons of activities that are non-communicative with those that are communicative. Thank you.